Welcome to data analysis. Much of what we're going to talk about here just as an introduction to many of the different ways that we're going to analyze data, but we got to start with something, and unfortunately all that something is usually definitions. So when we're talking about definitions, we're going to talk about, first individuals, and then after individuals, we'll talk about variables. So when we talk about individuals, we're talking about, like who, or what are the subjects. So some of you, like back in English, you remember it's thinking about like the who, what, when, where, why, how. Starting with really the who and what is being collected data upon. Once we do that, then we can start talking about the different types of variables. And our two big categories of variables are quantitative, 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 and qualitative. Quantitative or qualitative, and pretty much almost all data can fall into one of these two categories. All right, so aside from just those names, like let's talk about what they really are. Quant, which is the root word for quantitative, just think quantity or how many, but don't think how many. Actually, the words I want you to think of when you think of quantitative is measurable. Is the data measurable? Feet, inches, degrees, anything along those lines. It's something that's measurable. If you're just counting how many, you got to be careful that it doesn't fall into the other one, which is qualitative. And we think of the root word qual, like in quality, and that's more what you're thinking of. What's the quality? Or sometimes some books will call it categorical. Categorical, or what category is it? So a qualitative variable is one that can't be measured, so to speak. Hair color, brown. It's not a quantity; it's a quality. Sometimes when you're talking about clothing, you're looking at, all right, is it small, medium, or large? Those are qualities. However, if they then give numbers to it, like large is 44 to 48, well, then it's a quantity because it's actually measuring something, but it's a range of measurements. All right, so that's a quantity. Quality can be all sorts of different things when you're talking about describers. Like when you take a survey, how happy are you? Very unhappy, or mostly unhappy, somewhat unhappy. Don't know either way, somewhat happy, and then very happy. Those are all qualities that describe things. Quantity, then remember, quantity measurable. Quality categorical or category. So I said when you're talking about counting numbers, you say, okay, if it's a categorical variable like hair color, and you say, well, how many people have brown hair? And there's 5. That number 5 is not quantitative. It's counting how many qualities are being represented. Again, if you remember, measurable versus category. Measurable is the key word for whether or not it's quantitative. Once we have a variable and we start talking about it, then we can start making graphs. And sometimes a graph is called a distribution. So this distribution is a variable that tells us what values the variable takes and how often it takes these values on. Sometimes that's done in a pie graph. Like this looks like it's probably about 20%. 20% of the time it's going to be in this category, and maybe that's the brown hair again. And then you've got this one over here, which is about 10%, and maybe, I don't know, that's red. And then you've got 70%, which is everything else, because you can't be in one or the other. Other types of graphs that we'll have will be bar graphs. So maybe this is brown, this is red, this is other, except that my brown should be taller because I said there's more brown than red. All right, and then the other is the 70%, which goes off the top of my page. So if this is true of the entire population, let's just, again, this is all hypothetical. This is all fake data. All right, so I've got this, and I've got this one, I got this one. So if this is true of all the population, then we look at another population. If we want to say, is what we've seen in the past true of this new, maybe socioeconomic group, or maybe it's some ethnic group or something like that, does the hair color follow that same distribution? That would be using what we call inference. So we're going to take data, we're going to look at data, we're going to describe data, and then eventually we're going to use that to make an inference or to infer something, to make a guess about it based on past information. When finally then actually making a graph, first we identify what type of variable it is it quantitative or qualitative, and then we decide what is the best type of graph to use. For qualitative data, generally speaking, there's two. We're either going to make a pie chart. So a pie chart then shows percentage, and you can only be in one category. So when you're talking about music, is it rock? Is it country? Is it contemporary? Is it religious? Is it whatever? We would say that has to be one of those. It cannot be in multiple categories. So if you're doing a pie graph, you can't have one data point be both in this section and in this section. That just won't work for a pie graph. All right. So the other type of qualitative graph is what's called a bar chart. And I've already shown you basically how you can convert a pie chart into a bar graph. All right. For quantitative, there's many more types just because there's many more types of quantitative variables out there. So let's talk quick through just a few of them. I can make a two-way table. A two-way table just means like I'll have one variable over here, and maybe there's 4 categories, and I've got a variable here, and there's 3 categories. So category A, B, and C here, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now this could also be used when using qualitative for where to fit things into. But this would be using now for percentages. So more of a table, not as statistically sexy, if you will. So then we look at other quantitative types of graphs. We got a dot plot where we have different values along the bottom, 0, 1, 2, 3, and people respond with their answer, and so that's one person's response. They said 3, someone else said 2, this person said 3, this person said 3, this person said 3, and this person said 0 and 1, and then that would be a dot plot. We have distributions such as a histogram, where now maybe it's 0, 1, 2, and 3, and now we just take that and we move it into a histogram. Oop, that's supposed to be only 1 tall. So pretend there's an extra dot there. There we go. And then this one is 4 tall for 3. All right. So then that would be taking data from a dot plot, making it into a histogram. And the histogram can be used in many different ways. We'll look at different ways to explore histograms in class. And then you're looking at, is there an association? As this value gets larger, we see that there's more and more people that do that. So we're looking for, that's in what's called a positive association. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so I'm going to stop this video right here, and we'll pick up with more types of graphs and how to analyze graphs, categorical and then eventually quantitative as well. In terms of your reflection response form, my question is, what types of graphs do you typically see, whether they're in the newspaper or in books that you read? What types of graphs do you see most often? And give me some context. You don't have to list them all, but just give me 1 or 2 that you have seen in the past or recently, and where they're being used and maybe how they're being used. That's it. See you in class.